Welcome to Sober Talk. I'm Dennis and I'm an alcoholic. Sober today thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. If you or anyone you know is struggling with alcohol, please call Alcoholics Anonymous on 1300 222222 or visit their website at aa.org.au. I'll just run through the preamble of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for a membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses or opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety.
Welcome, Andy, whenever you're ready.
I came into Alcoholics Anonymous on the 7th of March 2011. I knew I had a drinking problem. I didn't think I was an alcoholic. But I left that room that night thinking just maybe they're onto something. They explained that phenomena craving to me. That abnormal reaction that the alcoholic type has to alcohol, and I identified with that. It was like a wee light bulb moment for me. So that's what happens, because it used to baffle me how I could never stop. How my mates could take a couple and go home, but once I started, I couldn't stop. I just couldn't guarantee my behaviour. It also explained that I suffered for this insanity or this delusion. That I just somehow believed that I was someday going to be able to regain control over this. And coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, this delusion needs to be completely smashed. Alcohol was my higher power. And coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, I identified with having that phenomenon of craving. I identified with that delusion, and I also identified with that disconnection from God or broken spirit. I'm from Glasgow. I've been sober since my very first meeting at Alcoholics Anonymous. I was told I could leave that room and need never drink again. It just happens to be true for me. But I had many, many, many failed attempts before I attempted that, before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was always swearing off it for good, and I've never sworn off alcohol since I've came to Alcoholics Anonymous. But coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm from the west of Scotland, and there's two religions there. I was christened as one. No idea about the religion, but I had my preconceived ideas on what religion was, and I judged it on how people behaved. So when I looked at these steps and I seen that word God, and seen some of these steps and what sounded like confession, I was like, I'm having none of that. I was pulled aside, and I was told everything I've learned up to that point in my life needs to be pushed aside. And is it possible just to have an open mind? And I've had to just take a wee leap of faith in Alcoholics Anonymous. I know what my life is like if I have to just carry on drinking. It's just more of the same madness. Or I can come into Alcoholics Anonymous and be a bit unsure of what the future lays ahead of me, but I know it's not the path that I get an opportunity to change direction. And part of that process is coming to believe in a higher power who I don't can't really describe it. I just know there is one, and it's not Andy. There's something makes all this work, and it's certainly not me. And I really, really struggled with this prayer and meditation, you know. I had this preconceived idea that prayer had to be done in your knees. Don't know where I got that from, but I just believed it had to be done in your knees. So I tried every way possible at trying to pray, not praying on my knees. I just would not humble myself to my Creator. And I tried lying in the bed and walking to work and cycling to work. And today I don't really flog myself over it. I don't identify with people who say they roll out of bed on their knees. I just don't identify with it. You know, especially these days. You know, life goes through changes. You know, I'm never this. I never just stay in a one place in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I used to refer to steps 10, 11 and 12 as the maintenance steps. Don't know where I heard that, but it sounded cool when I started repeating it. And I was in a meeting in Perth, and another Scottish fellow who was more than willing to confront me, pulled me aside outside and says, "Andy, you don't want to maintain what you have. These steps are about growing and enlarging in my spiritual life." You know, and that's what step 11 has been for me. You know, I didn't know what the word meditation meant. You know, I had preconceived ideas of what meditation was as well. You know, I don't know why I had this thought, but I just said, I believed meditation to be sitting cross-legged with my forefinger and my thumb in a wee circle, doing some hums or trying to clear my mind. And then I just so happened to be working in Kalgoorlie at the time, and a big guy pulled me aside and said, "Andy, why don't we look at the dictionary?" You know, and it had a couple of definitions. One went along the lines as consciously reviewing your thoughts and your actions. The other was in some religious practices to clear your mind. All right, and he says, let's look at step 11 in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. It says, when we retire at night, we constructively review our dates already been read. Were we resentful, selfish, afraid, do we owe an apology? All right, this is what I'm doing at night before I retire at night. They say to me, does that sound like consciously reviewing your thoughts and your actions for the day? You know, so I then believed that this is my meditation, right? I'm consciously reviewing my thoughts and actions, and I'm taking it into the next morning. But I get very confused because I says, no, I don't need to do this quiet time, right? But it talks about quiet time in the book as well, or some other literature. Our early members, they didn't read the book Alcoholics Anonymous and do their program. You know, they used to sit and read some spiritual literature. They probably read the Bible, right? Read some spiritual literature and tried to align their thoughts and their actions along with God's will. And like that St. Francis prayer has already been read, as he's gone on and written the 12 and 12, and straight out of page 99 in the 12 and 12. It talks about if we're unsure about this meditation, we may try something like this. And it talks about that St. Francis prayer. And does that not sound like me trying to align my will with God's intention for me? You know, to show love, kindliness and tolerance for my fellow man and all that. I'd love to say I do that every day, but I don't. You know, and I can turn up to a meeting Alcoholics Anonymous and look at bits in the book and say I do this and I do that, and the reality is I don't. You know, life is a bit fluid. I get woken up this morning with my 4-year-old saying, somebody wipe my bum. You know, there's no way that I'm rolling out my bed, doing a prayer and doing a meditation and then going wipe my wee man's butt. You know, life changes, man. Before I met my now wife, you know, I had this thing pretty honed. I was up doing the toilet, doing the meditation, doing the prayer, and if I skipped it, you know, if I find myself staying up too late the night before and I start to skimping this stuff, I start to be in collision with people, places and things throughout my day. You know, so through practicing this stuff, I know when I consistently do my prayer and my meditation prior to bouncing out the door, I do my step 10s throughout the day and then do my step 11 at night, you know, consciously review my thoughts and my actions. Life's pretty good. You know, but I met my now wife and I explained that I do this meditation in the morning because I'm quite embarrassed for anybody. Like, I don't know why I have this either, but I'm really embarrassed to be seen to be praying or meditating in front of somebody else. But when I was drinking, I didn't give a hoot at me falling down the street. No, so I try and make this a routine in my life. You know, like this morning, I got up, done everything I had to do with my son, took him to his daycare, then I came back and then I can sit down and get a meditation done, a bit of mindfulness meditation. You know, I take a bit of time and I use a mindfulness meditation app and I try doing that, clear my mind to a wee bit of spiritual music or a wee bit of something that will direct my thinking or direct my intentions for the day. You know, and I go through periods I've been diverted from my primary purpose in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I came really undone round about 9 years sober. Because money, property and prestige started to take over. You know, I had this thought, just if I had more money. You know, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and I was sponsored and I was sponsoring guys and I was doing service and I started, cleared up the wreckage in my past, made most of my amends and, you know, I'd this thought if I educate myself and I make a wee bit more money and I have this job title and I'll start to feel better about myself. And I started to chase money and job titles and it took me away from regular meetings. I was working fly in, fly out and this stuff started to slip. You know, I stopped praying, I stopped meditating, stopped doing nightly reviews and I used to fly through Adelaide and the thought of a drink came back when I was on a flight from Adelaide to Perth. And I've heard people saying God can be the chair or be the table or be that tree or whatever it is or be your sponsor. I just simply do not believe in that. It has to be greater than all that for me. No, because at that moment I thought of a drink. It was like I couldn't nudge the guy next to me and say, mate, I'm worried I'm going to take a drink. You know, I looked out the window and prayed like hell. God, I need help. You know, and I get through that moment and I was really struggling in other areas of my life. Material-wise, I was good, building a house, I was engaged to be married, bank balance was good, but I was just spiritually bankrupt. And I had to ask another man to help us and take me through this process again. And, you know, the excuse comes in, I'm too tired to do this nightly review at night. And it talks about when we retire at night. He says, so, see when you've sat down, like after you've had your dinner, you've come home for your meeting, and just you sat down and you start to relax, do it then. And if you forget to do it for whatever reason, just do it the next morning, right? And if you're out and up and raced out, just get a moment at some point throughout the day and practice that meditation. I can talk to God any time. You know, it talks about in the 12 and 12 as well. You know, this is like a journey for us. You know, but I personally have heard I don't know, I judge myself with other people in Alcoholics Anonymous and what I hear them doing, and I go, I'm not doing that, so I'm not good enough, or I must be wrong. Right? It talks about after the 12 and 12, it's on page 101 here, it says, this could be a fragment of what is called meditation, perhaps a very first attempt at a mood, a flyer into the realm of the spirit, if you like. It ought to be followed by a good look at where we stand now, and a further look at where what might happen in our lives, where we're able to move closer to the idea we have been trying to glimpse. Talks about meditation as well. It's a development process, you know. I'm not going to tell you it's right or wrong for you. Like, just find a process that works for you. And it's like, for me, my prayer as well, I found at one point, my prayer as well, I used to get up, serenity prayer, step 3, prayer, step 7, prayer, acceptance prayer. And it started to get really into a routine, whereas like 5 minutes later, I'm like, could I say that step 3 prayer? Did I say that step 7 prayer? It just became like parrot fashion. There was no thought in it. There was no feeling in it. So now I'm not too hard on myself, as long as I'm consciously trying to talk to God. You know, I want to be a better man. You know, it's like, so when I'm talking to God, I want to be a better employee. Ever reminding myself that I work for God. You know, so it's like, it's just a job, but when I turn up to do the job, I try and be the best employee I can for my employer, the people who pay my wage. You know, I try and have that nicer interaction with everybody who's just trying to be the best self that day. Trying to be a better husband, trying to be a better son, trying to be a better grandson, trying to be a better father. You know, and I fall short constantly. You know, and these steps aren't there to flog myself with. You know, it's I used to flog myself out there when I was in the depths of my alcoholism. You know, but this progress rather than perfection, I just don't fall short every day and just go, it's progress. Right? I'm not beating anybody up anymore. I'm not falling down drunk anymore, so that's progress. Right? It's just not good enough. You know, it's like, I want to strive for perfection. I want to be the best version of me possible. Right? But I don't flog myself when I fall short. I just try and pull my socks up and try and be a better man the next day. You know, and that's I get that opportunity to do that nightly review, do a bit of prayer and meditation on that the next morning, and just try and do a little bit better. You know, and it's I'm running out a wee bit of steam there, but this is ever developing for me. I just try to be the best the alcoholic that I can be. You know, I'm just a garden variety drunk. I'm not trying to be the best. I'm just trying to do the best that I can with this. You know, striving for to be better. And I'm just going to leave it there. I'm just glad to be here and glad to be sober.
AA has more than 2 million recovering alcoholics throughout the world. In Australia, there are about 18,000 members. They meet in over 2,000 local meetings spread around the country. Meetings range in size from a handful in some areas to hundreds or more in larger communities. And once again, if anyone you know is struggling with alcohol issues, please call Alcoholics Anonymous in 1300 222222 or visit their website on aa.org.au.